Hi there, I'm Jason Ball, and this is Life After News. This is the 10th interview we've done, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from our guest. I've learned a lot about the process of making a podcast. We've had a great response. The downloads are above average for a podcast, so we're lucky for that. We've had nearly 100,000 views on Instagram. We've had more than 25,000 video views, so I'm proud of that. And I'm grateful to everyone who has subscribed, listened, watched, and given us good reviews. Please keep it coming. We really appreciate it. On today's episode, Christina Pascucci quit her TV news job in Los Angeles less than 2 years ago. She ran for U.S. Senate. She had a baby. She went to Yemen. She joined the California State Guard. Now she's expecting another baby. So today you're going to find out all about that, how she did all that in less than 2 years, and what she's passionate about today. Christina, you left news less than 2 years ago, and you have been super busy. Let me recount some of the things that you've done. You ran for Senate. You had a baby. You joined the California State Guard. You went to Yemen, among other world travels. You started a company, and now you're expecting your second child.
You do your homework, Jason Ball.
What did I leave out?
Like a true newsman. Gosh, that sounds like a lot, and my head is spinning right now. I've been up since 2 a.m. today, and I don't know if it's because I knew I was talking to you, and so old habits die hard, and my body clock was like, you gotta get up for the morning news. But there's been so much happening personally, professionally, a whole evolution of what I want the next iteration of my life to look like. And so in addition to everything you mentioned, I think there's been a lot of soul searching happening of, am I being intentional with the time I have left on this planet? And is every action I'm taking serving that purpose while also helping me to be the best mom I can be? Because that is my favorite role, of course.
I mean, that self-reflection is a big part of this podcast. It always bubbles up because we're all in these change points in our lives, and it's a moment to step back and reflect on it. I definitely want to talk about Alessandra and the new baby coming. She's adorable. I got to meet her recently. So how is she doing? She's had a big birthday since I saw her.
She has. It is so fun, Jason. I could almost cry just thinking about her, and she's getting to a really fun age. She's 14 months, and she's mimicking everything we do. She's saying all the words we say. We have to really be careful with our behavior because, we notice how she's soaking it all up like a sponge. And we just got back from a few weeks in Europe. We took her to 6 different countries and went to visit some long-lost family members I never knew existed in Slough, which was crazy. But we took her through from Liechtenstein to Germany, Austria, Slovenia, ended in Slovakia. I feel like I'm missing one there, Switzerland. But we were, hiking and out in nature. And I think my life in news, one of the things I value most is being adaptable. And she is so adaptable. She just, we put her in different situations that you're not so sure with a little baby how it's going to go. And we take the risk and she thrives. And that makes me a proud mama.
That's amazing because I don't have kids, but that's what everyone says. Train them early to be adaptable and to go with the flow and adapt to your lives instead of the other way around.
I think it's one of the greatest qualities or characteristics you could have, and one of the biggest gifts I got from news because, as you know, you're waking up at all hours of the day. Sometimes it's an 8-hour shift, sometimes it's a 24-hour shift, sometimes you end up in a war zone in Ukraine, and you just can't necessarily predict what's going to happen. And it's funny because it drives my husband absolutely bonkers because he's a planner, and you can't be married to me and expect that things are going to go according to plan.
He had to have known this was coming.
That's what I tell him. I'm like, you know what you signed up for.
You knew what you were getting into.
Yeah. So don't hold it against me now.
All right. So let's back up a little bit. In 2023, Dianne Feinstein died, and the Senate race was already going on. But at that point, you decided that you were going to get into a very crowded field of the Senate race. So what was that decision process like?
Were you surprised?
I was very surprised.
It was bubbling up for a while where I wanted to run. Covering news for such a long time, a lot of these really important issues from homelessness to affordability in California to something I'm really passionate about, which is foster care and the completely inept system that repeatedly traumatizes our kids that I would love to revamp. It's my dream to revamp. But anyway, I digress. So I was just looking at all these issues that I had covered for 15 plus years that remain remained unchanged. And I was so frustrated, and I saw the field and I knew there were some big names, and those were names that I had interviewed who had been repeating the same BS for 15 plus years. They were career politicians. And nothing against career politicians if you're doing an excellent job, but I felt in my heart that I had studied these issues. I knew the root causes of a lot of them, and my heart was in it for the right reasons. And I was 5 months pregnant with my daughter. So maybe, it instilled a little crazy in me. But the only thing crazier than not running to me at that point, or then running, was not running. And I knew I would regret it if I didn't take the shot. And so, to me, that's what life is about. If you believe in something strongly, freaking do it, even if all odds are against you. And I do think, all things considered, he did pretty well in the race. There were 27 people running. I ended up on the leaderboard. I was the only Democrat who even polled, other than the 3 names that we heard throughout the entire race. And had a couple things been different, I think the race would have been shaken up even more. But yeah, I have no regrets. And it's built an infrastructure for me should I decide to run again, right, which was always what I told my donors. I couldn't have taken people's money in good faith had I not had an intent to continue the fight.
100%. Actually, I take it back. I wasn't surprised. I mean, I was a little initially surprised, but then after I thought about it, I'm like, no, this makes perfect sense. Well, that had to have been a pretty intense, because you got in the race in October and the primary was in March. That had to be a pretty intense 6-7 months.
It was some of the most intense moments of my life. There was so much joy and pain and frustration, and it was also really beautiful because, a lot of times when people talk about someone else, or when they learn about, how do I say this? Like, we don't talk about people until it's their funeral. But during this race, I had to call every single person I've ever known and ask them for support or money, which is a soul crushing endeavor to take on. I don't want to ask people for anything. I want to help. And I called every single person I've ever known, from, like former teachers I had in high school, to the random guy I made out with at Coachella, to ex-boyfriends, to former bosses like you. And yep. I know a lot of news people can't really get involved in any way in the race, so that was an interesting dynamic. But I really saw my entire life flash before my eyes, and hear direct feedback from people who are like genuinely supportive. Like, I can't believe you're doing this, although it makes perfect sense. And of course I'll support you. And the first person to max out on a check was an ex-boyfriend who said, you're made for this, and you've always had a heart of service. And that really meant a lot, just to have those reflections from people from all parts of my past.
So, I mean, you're completely switching roles. You're used to asking the questions and being the one that are, challenging the politicians and the candidates, to being on the other side of that. Was there anything you were surprised about?
I hate being asked questions. I like to ask the questions. Any interviewer asking me anything, I wanted to say, well, tell me more about you. No, it was all the skills. I felt, in a sense, I had prepared for that moment for my entire life, even though I had no political experience, because in a way I actually did. I was studying the issues. I was raising awareness around them. I did a lot of philanthropic work in my free time, and I had advocated for policy and testified before the Senate and the state capitol to create legislation to help homeless families. And so in a way, I was prepped for that moment. I think the biggest surprise, and were just a couple huge blunders that happened during the race that were huge learning experiences, and they kind of still haunt me, because I think, what if those hadn't happened? Would the outcome have looked a lot different? Things like the Secretary of State admitting she made a unprecedented mistake by leaving information off the ballot that is proven to cut your numbers in half. And once that happened, that really hurt the positioning of our campaign. And that was a hard pill to swallow.
So you mean the description of who you are?
Yeah. I mean, it's your number one way to communicate with voters, because, as you know, a lot of times people aren't that informed on what's going on with politics. They have a lot going on. They have their families to feed. They have things to take care of. And so it's pretty much the number one way you can communicate with voters is by the description on the ballot underneath your name, which mine would have said local TV journalist. And people would have, there were so many people who said, I think I know that name, but once they would see the description, they'd say, aha, it is her. But the Secretary of State sent out a press release admitting that they made an administrative error and left it off. And that my election attorney up in Sacramento said he had never seen that in his 30 plus years. He's seen plenty of mistakes from the Secretary of State, but nothing like that.
So I remember seeing your name on the ballot.
Yeah.
But what did it say? Nothing beside it?
Yeah, my name was on the ballot and then it just said nothing. No ballot, or it'd say no ballot designation in some cases. And all my opponents had, congressmen or whatever the case might be. So that was a huge hit. And then also being left off the debate stage was a huge hit. And it hurt because it was Fox 11 that was controlling that debate. And they didn't give any sort of criteria for how you would qualify to be in the debate. But there was only 6 people whose numbers were even polling out of 27 people running. So to have 6 people on stage, including myself, would have not been, a heavy lift for them. But they just chose to do the top 4, the 3 politicians whose names we had heard for a year and Steve Garvey. That was frustrating too, because then they did tons of other debates and they had 10 people on stage for much smaller races. So it really illuminated huge gaps in our system to me, in our political system, that really perpetuates dysfunction.
So your takeaway at the end of it, and it's been over a year now, would you run again?
Absolutely. I wouldn't change a thing about having run. And in the future, I definitely do want to run again for the right race. I probably will take a less high risk because that was a huge race to jump into for the first time. Yeah. But, I have a lot of infrastructure set up. I have donors who are excited to support when the time comes. And I did consider it actually for this upcoming election. And I've decided not to for a number of reasons. But in the future, it's not off the table.
Good. You learn something from it and you'll take that to the next, whatever that is. I think that's the great thing about being a journalist too. We move on quickly from things and learn from them and take that to the next, whatever the next thing is.
What is life for if not for taking big risks and doing things that scare you and, just experiencing the colors of life? There's so much it has to offer. And I think that's why I never expected to be in one job for so long. I was at KTLA for over 11 years. But I think because of how every day is different and it was just such a special place and you learn something new every day, it reels you in.
For sure. I also find you're fascinated. You've been to over 105 countries. There are only 195, so you've been to more than half of them.
I want to go to all of them.
But you also don't go, you're not just a tourist. You're not looking for the beach or that experience. I feel like you're looking to learn more about people and cultures.
It's my favorite thing to do is to meet with locals, to stay with locals, to learn from them. I think if people traveled more, we would have world peace because there's just so much lack of understanding of our fellow humans. And so in Yemen, for example, like you mentioned, that was something I did. I spent a lot of time with locals. I got to learn their perspective of world affairs. And it was one of the most fascinating places I had ever been to. It was just so drastically different from things I had experienced before. So I don't know. I wish there was a way. I know traveling can be expensive and cost prohibitive, and people have so many obligations that stop them from traveling. But even if it's going, from LA to Central America, which isn't that far and it's pretty affordable, I think it's just so important to force yourself out of your comfort zone and your bubble.
I agree. And I think at the end of the day, we learn we're all trying to do the same things. We're trying to take care of our lives and take care of our families and do the best for ourselves and just do a better job for our families.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I think of my daughter now and the polarization that we see. I want her to be a citizen of the world. I want her to feel like when she sees another human, she can look them in the eye and make contact and smile and not, we're just so in these silos and don't look at each other and when you walk by. And that's one of my favorite things to do actually when I go on a run or walk is look at someone and just flash them a smile and say hello and see how uncomfortable they get.
Especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, why'd they say hi to me? Yeah, it's funny to see.
But here in Palm Springs, people say hi all the time.
Oh, do they?
People say hello. Yeah, it's funny. It's very different than just LA 2 hours away.
Does any part of you miss LA?
Sure. I mean, LA was home for us for almost 20 years. We loved living there. I actually never thought that I would live anywhere. I didn't think I could live anywhere. I guess I was a little arrogant there, and I thought I could never live anywhere but Los Angeles. But it's, it's close enough. I get my fix. I went to Cowboy Carter and spent a few days in LA.
I saw that. That looked fun. That looked like a wild night, Jason.
Yeah, it kind of was.
Well, I think it's a really interesting dynamic to be, because you're obviously my former boss. And so you had a front row seat to the evolution of Christina Pascucci, and I'm sure that was a sight to behold at times. I know I am responsible for driving you crazy more than once. So, and we've known each other since I was thinking about it. I think since I was 24. So I'm curious what insight you have of.
Well, I would say you are one of everyone is different. Every reporter and every anchor is different, but there are certain similarities. But you have this wild hair or this wanderlust. I don't know. And the only thing time I got worried was when you and Kimberly went to India to meet the Dalai Lama, but you were out like MIA for like 24 or 36 hours. I'm like, where are they?
Oh my God. I don't think I realized that because I just thought she was I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying,
no. It happens. You get caught up in it. There was a reporter. You know Dave Malkoff?
Yeah.
So he was a reporter with us, and he was in Iraq during the late years of the war, and he was MIA for days at one point. And I'm like, this makes me crazy because I'm always the mama bear taking care of everybody, making sure everybody's okay. So it was just one of those things. But
yeah,
I eventually learned to lean into your I don't even know what you call it.
Crazy. You can call it crazy.
At one point, I'm like, I should call her mother. I'm sure we can commiserate.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember when you did call my mom or she called you because they thought that I was kidnapped?
Oh.
Do you remember that?
I forgot about that.
It just came to me. Gosh, we've been through a lot together. But it was, I remember I wanted to do a story on it afterwards and you would have let me and I was like, dang it. But it was kind of like the scam that was going around where people would call older parents and say, we have your child. And they called my parents and they said, if you don't wire the money right now, we're going to start chopping off our fingers and send them to you in the mail.
I do remember this now. I'd forgotten about that. Wow. Good Lord, your poor mother.
I know, my poor mother. At the time, too, I was on a plane. So all of you guys were trying to call me and I was en route to Italy. And so I had a stopover in New York. And when I landed, I had countless messages and one very cryptic one from you, I think, saying like, where are you? Or something like that. And I said, this is so strange. But anyway,
Has motherhood changed it for you, or you just want to take the kids along on the adventure?
I think my husband comments how I'm more nervous about certain things than he thought. And I am about things like, for example, his parents live in Florida. I love them, by the way. They're amazing. And they have a pool that's not gated. And so when she goes there, it makes me nervous just thinking about the potential of drowning. I'm just careful about random things because I feel like in the news, you are taught that anything wrong, you cover the worst of humanity and the worst stories. And so it's hard for me to trust people who I don't know with her. And I think things that are common sense, but that I'm a little bit extra cautious of because of what a lot of my career was. But,
I agree 100.
Yeah, I mean,
we play worst case scenario better than anybody because we have seen every worst case scenario.
Completely. And I try to be prepared for the worst case scenario. But on the other end, if she falls down or something, I'm not overly protective. I want her to make mistakes and fail fast and hard, kind of like that's my motto is fail fast and, get up and pick yourself back up and keep going and just experience life as much as you can. So I think there's a hybrid of things going on there. I hope I don't. Sure. I'm just like, I just don't want to screw her up is what it comes down to.
I'm sure that's what every parent's goal is, but I'm sure she's going to be lovely. And when's the new baby coming?
In August.
Wow.
Yeah, little boy.
So they'll be close, like 2 years apart.
They'll be 16 months apart.
Oh, wow.
Which is a little bit scary. And I can't say exactly what, but there's some potential big life-changing news in addition to that coming up. Oh. And
can you give us a hint?
A little tease. There might be just a big move that's happening in the near future. And for some reason, I guess I like to have these big life-changing events when I'm pregnant or about to give birth because I gave birth to Alessandra, I think, a week after the U.S. Senate race finished.
Well, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Yeah. To me, it's all about continuing to grow and evolve. And you mentioned I started a company. I think working in news helped me realize the things I'm most passionate about, and that's global diplomacy, strategic communications, and social impact. And so I get a chance to do all three with my new company, and I hope to continue that in this next
So your
phase
new
of life.
company is called Atlas,
Yes.
and you started last year. And tell us more about what it is.
It's a consultancy firm. It combines the three things I just mentioned. It's helping my clients maximize their media presence and awareness and also their political influence. So, for example, the Change Reaction is one of my clients, and they're one of the biggest donors in Los Angeles, direct giving donors in Los Angeles, and if not the country. They've done amazing work with the fire relief and helping fire survivors. This philanthropist has given away about $50 million since their inception 5 years ago. And they're such good people. And my goal with them has been they did no media before. So now by telling their story and the incredible work that they're doing, it's inspired almost this change reaction, this movement of people who are now paying it forward and helping other people. And it's so fulfilling to see. And then also, if clients have a need to connect with a politician or on policy, that's something I can do too, based on.
What was the name of the nonprofit? I'm sorry.
Oh, the Change Reaction.
Change Reaction. Okay. I'll check that out.
Yeah, check them out. They do philanthropy in a whole other way. You see so many nonprofits that waste a ton of money, or you don't know how much of the money you give is actually going to help people. And 100% of everything that's given to them goes straight to the people who need it. And then the founders, the co-founders of the organization, they front all the costs for the actual nonprofit.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you mentioned foster care, and we've talked about this before. Your challenges, did that come from Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or did they come from somewhere else?
It was a combination of places. So I'm on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and also I work with the Junior League of Los Angeles and a ton of other nonprofits, but those two in particular focused on underserved kids. And it was during work with those organizations that I learned that 50% of the homeless population was in foster care and 75% of the incarcerated. And those are conservative numbers. And so I saw reforming that system as a very obvious way to hit all of these societal issues we face that we haven't found true resolve or solutions for. We keep throwing money at the problem. We have billions of dollars spent on homelessness in LA County alone with nothing to show for it. I just, when I look at my daughter now, and Christian Bale, who's starting a whole school or a whole home for foster youth, and I think in the Palmdale area, he said the same thing when he saw his daughter and just how much he loved her, and realizing that a lot of kids don't get that support and love. He wanted to do everything he could to make sure that they would have that kind of love. And I feel the same way. There's so many kids who are neglected or abused, or, that Gabriel Fernandez story that we did that just haunts me to this day. And so I want to do everything I can to make sure every child feels loved.
If people want to help that, how can other people get involved in that cause?
Well, there's organizations doing incredible work around foster youth, and the Change Reaction is actually one of them. I think there's organizations that are doing great things on a micro level, like Friends LA, United Friends with the Children. But honestly, more needs to be done. There's not nearly enough support or resources, or the right kind of resources to support these kids. Even with mental health, the way that it currently works, according to a foster youth I was just interviewing a couple weeks ago, because of the system they have in place, they have to see a new therapist every few weeks. They don't get the continuity of having one therapist and getting to trust that person and lean into that person. It's like they have all these people coming in and out of their life, and they never really get a chance to feel secure and safe. And so just even simple things like that need to change. And I mean, we need to gut the current system as it exists, because I think.
So is it about reuniting the families and rehabilitating the whole family, or is it about adoption, or combinations of the both?
It's about, another issue is the foster for hire. So I was looking into being a foster mom, and it's something I want to do one day. And in the, where they bring all the potential foster parents together and you ask questions, there are tons of people in that Zoom group that were obviously in it for the wrong reasons, who were kind of like, oh, how much money am I going to get? And I'm not trying to judge them or anything, but there were people who clearly were asking about how much money they're going to get. It just the intention was obviously not for the right reasons. And foster for hire is a huge problem. So I think the solution there would be, empower foster parents, good foster parents, to take in foster kids, give them the support they need so that they can get to work and, kind of like childcare. Like you would give, we need good foster parents to have more support so that these kids aren't going from home to home every year. I mean, that there's kids that are placed, more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in different homes. Stability is one of the main things a young child needs.
100%, you're right. Stability is the number one thing. So you did something else this year this did surprise me when you joined the California State Guard.
Oh. What did you think when you saw that photo?
I was like, wow, that's interesting.
So
what made you do that, and what's your role in that?
Yeah, so someone that I know who's in the California State Guard I had lunch with them, and they were talking about their service, and I've always wanted to serve. I really appreciate law enforcement, our firefighters, first responders, and I secretly almost wish that I could have gone and served overseas in some capacity. And he told me that there was the California State Guard, and it's like there's no cutoff age. You can serve really at any age. They have retirees who serve in the California State Guard. And so when I expressed interest, he told them about it, and they ended up recruiting me to serve in their communications arm in a new arena that they were building. And it was actually really interesting. I think I got sworn in January 4th. January 7th, the fires broke out. And so I was deployed right away without even going to training. And because they needed that mass communication ability to be deployed right away. They call it activated, actually, not deployed. But the California State Guard said that they had seen a huge uptick in recruitment because of all the communications we did. We reached over 1 million people in a very short time because of strategic communications, what we did on digital, the content we created. And normally the military is a little bit more closed off, and you don't see the inner workings as much as you did during the fires, because the team that they assembled very quickly put that as a priority. And I think it was really important in getting the information people needed at that time.
So the State Guard works for the National Guard and the other state reserves. Is that right?
Yeah, in my case, I worked with the National Guard. Usually they're separate entities, but I guess it's below it. And it does get confusing for people who have never heard of it before.
I just wanted to clarify, you worked with the National Guard so people understand kind of what it is, because I'd really never heard of the State Guard.
Yeah.
So you were on the other side of the microphone, so to speak, in this situation, because you're used to being out there. You would have been covering those fires. Instead, you were on the other side of it. How was that?
I don't know if this happens to you, but I don't even feel like I've left news because it's in my blood. Like I breathe news. I live and breathe it if there's any big breaking story. And so had I not been activated to cover and respond to what was happening and help in some way, I would have gone insane. I was so grateful to be there, to be able to, I actually ended up, so I still do media in the sense that I appear on Fox News every week or every other week, and also do News Nation hits. And they brought me on to cover the fire, so to speak, that day because of my involvement with the Guard. So it kind of felt like, in a way, I was still covering it because I was describing, what it was like driving through the flames. And I had never seen a fire behave that way. It was just insanity. And I was pregnant too at the time. It was like pretty early on. So that gave me a little bit of angst, and my husband a little bit of angst. God bless him. But yeah, so it was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of being more in service than reporting, but then reporting came into it a bit too.
So it's a good mix for you. That way you could do a little both.
Yeah. And then when I, because I had started this consultancy, the Change Reaction was already activating to help fire survivors. And so we held a bunch of events and gave out direct checks to people who needed relief right away and couldn't wait for insurance companies to respond. And so that was really rewarding too, and made me feel like, I was involved in some way, because I think everyone felt it. You wanted to act, you wanted to do something to help, but in a way you felt so helpless, because where do you even start?
I agree. Just even sitting out here, I think that was probably the biggest fire ever, or in my time in Southern California for sure. And it was just devastating, and you didn't even know what to do. And then there was the one in the Hollywood Hills where like our neighbors lived, our friends lived, and then the Eaton fire that those poor people in Altadena too. They had lived there for decades and decades. You just feel so terrible for them.
Yeah. And they're still dealing with the repercussions of it while the news cycle has largely moved
Moved
on,
on.
which is a weird
So
thing.
I feel like just kind of talking to you, it was almost like being a news anchor reporter. You couldn't do enough, and you needed to do more. So that's one of the reasons you went and doing all these other things, because you feel like you can have a bigger impact.
Exactly. Yeah. I stayed in it longer than I probably, and by the way, I never ever write off going back into news. I do think it's
Mm.
possible one day that I might in some capacity, but I remember being sent to a liquor store for the 500th time to cover lottery fever. And I was standing there and I felt like life was draining from my veins. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I think that was a moment I said, I can't do this anymore. You know, I had stayed for so long because that was balanced out by so many amazing assignments that I felt very lucky to have, like the Dalai Lama, like going to Ukraine, going to Armenia, traveling the world, you know, and then telling really important stories here locally and seeing how our news stories helped people. That those days were gold. But then the days when you were sent to the lotto fever thing, or you know, what's another one? You know, Storm Watch 2025. And then you go out there and there's a little trickle of rain. It just felt like such BS and I couldn't.
I hear you. So, what advice would you give to someone who's kind of feeling the same way now?
Well, I think it's important to be very thoughtful and reflective in that you think, okay, because the grass isn't always greener on the other side, you know? And if you're feeling a tug somewhere, there's a reason for that. So it's really important to listen to what that feeling is and where it's coming from. But are you in a state of mind where you're being negative and ungrateful? Are you focusing on the bad rather than taking in all? Because any job will come with things that you don't always love. So that's why I was willing to go to the gas station for, you know, the 200th, 300th time. But then there came a point where it felt like not the bad, but just the unfulfilling was outweighing the fulfilling. And that's when I knew I had to have a career pivot. And I just, you know, there is something to be said for people who spend their entire career at one place in TV news. I think it's very special to have that deep rooted sense of community. And, you know, like a Gail Anderson, there's a reason that she held the Olympic torch and why she's a Los Angeles treasure. And there's something to be said for that. And you have to listen to whatever you're called to do. If you're the type of person that would rather grow roots in one place and you feel satisfied, then you listen to that. If you are the type of person where you constantly want to grow and evolve and shift and change and, you know, make an impact in a different way, then you got to listen to that. And that's where I was. And I thought about it for a long time and ultimately just listened to my gut. And there are things I miss, of course, but I do feel confident I've made the right decision and that the impact I'm making is greater in what I'm doing now and will continue to do.
That's amazing. That's great.
What about you?
That's good.
Why did
That's good.
you?
The same.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same. The pandemic kind of did me in, so I just needed to do something different. And it's been 4 years now, so we moved to Palm Springs and doing our thing here. But I needed to reconnect, I guess, to that world. That's why I started this podcast and this. I call it more of a project. It's more of a project of just illuminating journalists and TV, particularly TV journalists, and the skills sets that we have and how we can translate it to different genres or different industries, or how we can continue to make an impact.
I love that you're doing this, Jason. And I've listened to some of the episodes. They're super interesting. And I'm your biggest fan. So thank you.
You too.
Thank you for doing this. And what you said is so spot on, because I would recommend anyone who's interested in journalism to embrace it full throttle and go into it and make the most of it, because the skills that you acquire are so invaluable and unlike any other job out there. I actually think more journalists should run for office. I think they should lead companies. I think it's just, you're adaptable. You think on your feet. You learn how to navigate the crazy politics of the newsroom. There's just, it's an endless list. Storytelling, which really, in any industry, storytelling is key, I think. So I
The
can't say enough
curiosity
about
we
it.
have to, the honest, the genuineness of wanting to get to know people and hear their stories and then tell their stories is, I think that's hugely valuable.
Yeah. And just look at the time we're living in now and the short attention spans people have. You will make the most impact by understanding how to get people to care and how to shape the narrative. And there's really no more important skill than that, because even if you're doing the best life-saving work, if no one's paying attention or cares, then how can you make bigger impact? So yeah, just my 2 cents.
Of course.
My
Of all
unbiased.
your travels, there are many places you went. I'm like, I'm not going there. I would never go there. But the one place that you went that I would like to go was to see the monarchs in Mexico. Tell me about that experience.
Oh, okay. So every November-ish to March, monarch butterflies, millions of them, make this epic, just like otherworldly migration. It's a 3,000-mile journey these little insects are making, and it's just absolutely magical and a wonder to behold. And there's this little part of in this forest of Mexico where you can go and see just them completely covering more than you could even ever imagine. And you hear their wings flapping, and it's just a spiritual, awesome experience. Actually, a couple weeks after I went, there was CBS 60 Minutes. Anderson Cooper went, and he did a story with the same guide that I was with Natural Habitat Adventures. And they do a lot of conservation work with World Wildlife Fund. And wow, you have to go. Are you going to go next year or?
It looks amazing. And there are literally millions and millions of these monarch butterflies, and they come from all over North America, right?
Yeah, and they're really important. I mean, pollinators, you don't necessarily, we hear sometimes about the bees, which I know you're very passionate about. Do you still do beekeeping?
No, not now, but monarchs are important. I used to plant milkweed in LA too, so monarchs are important.
Oh, you did? Oh my God, that warms my heart because it's so important for their survival. And it has to be, the distinction they told me is it has to be native milkweed, not kind of an invasive species milkweed.
Plant milkweed.
Yeah. If you get nothing
You
else
can
from
usually
this
get it at
podcast.
Home Depot in the spring.
Yeah, it's super easy. You just you can put it out on your porch, and it makes a big difference. If you get nothing else from this podcast, plant
Oh, I
milkweed.
think there's plenty of takeaways here. We got good stuff here. Plenty of good information and takeaways. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's so good to see you. I'm so happy for you and your family. So happy to see Alessandra again someday soon and baby number 2.
Yeah, I know. They're gonna have your Uncle Jason.
Yep.
We'll have to have a meeting coming up soon. It was so good to see you, and thank you for asking me to come on.
And let us know about the big change coming.
Big
changes are
news.
coming.
I will. Breaking news. You heard a tidbit of it here first.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.
You can follow Christina's story on Instagram at Christina Pascucci. The organization she was talking about is the Change Reaction. The website is changereaction.org. These links will both be in the show notes. In the next episode of Life After News, another KTLA alumni, Carlos Amesca, was the original anchor for the morning news. And he says it's the first time he's ever told the story of why he actually left and what went down. And it's an interesting story, and it's one I'd never heard the story before, so I assume it's new to all of us. And you'll learn about the digital streaming platform that he and his daughter created on their own and the amazing work they're doing on that. So you don't want to miss that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe on our YouTube page. Links will be in the show notes. You can follow me on Instagram at Mr. Jason Ball or at Life After News Pod. Also, LinkedIn's a great place for me to talk. I love have conversations there about journalism, career pivots, etc. New episodes every Tuesday. If you like us, give us good reviews and share with a friend. Thank you so much.